The NBA season is right on the horizon, and expectations are fully building for the Philadelphia 76ers. While there are more questions than answers about this Sixers squad in regard to who will be in the starting lineup, what level of health will these stars be at, and will this team even be relevant this year, we do have a little bit of intel that I do want to break down from Nick Nurse directly about each of this question. Yes, we have multiple updates about this Sixers team with the season right around the corner, and I'm starting to get juiced up right here. So the biggest thing that I do want to start off with is ultimately Quentin Grimes being back in the building here. We knew this contract saga drug out for quite a length of time throughout the duration of the summer, and I don't think fully ended where either side necessarily wanted it to be the case, but nonetheless, he is back in the building and treating things all business. As he met with reporters today following his first day at practice, and he said, quote, "It's in the past," Grimes said at practice on Wednesday. "It's a business, I know that, but I'm here to come here, play for the city of Philly, play for my teammates, and play for Coach Nurse, and do what I can to help the team win for sure." And I do like that attitude from Quentin Grimes here. I do think one of the reasons that ultimately this was the decision that it was landed on for him opting into the qualifying offer from the Sixers perspective was to prove that you can do this again. And that is exactly what he needs to do for himself individually from that future contract standpoint. And of course, what it brings to this Sixers team. And there does seem to be good news in that regard, as he was spoken about highly following practice by Nick Nurse directly there, as he was asked about Quentin. And he said, quote, "He's explosive and athletic, and he was energetic today. He played hard and looked like he's been working out. It didn't look like his first day," which is exactly what we do want to hear. This is a guy who needs to make sure that that second half of the season was not a fluke, that he is putting himself in a position to maximize his earnings in the future, and that's going to be directly done by helping this Sixers team. Now, when bringing the conversation of this Sixers team as a whole, Quentin Grimes is a really interesting X factor, as obviously he arrived in the second half of the season last year, and there was no true feel for how does he fit with Tyrese Maxey, with Jared McCain. Sure, he did play a little bit with Maxey. McCain was already out for the year, and VJ Edgecombe being a whole nother layer of how things will shake out and who are the key figures of the Sixers team. Well, what has been sort of the worst kept secret about this Sixers team has been the potential for a three-guard lineup, which Nick Nurse brought up himself in the post-game presser, post-practice presser. And Kyle Neubeck tweets out, "Nick Nurse says starting a three-guard lineup is, quote, on the table." And he puts in parentheses here, "It also sounds more and more like Maxey and VJ are going to be starting together regardless of the rest of the roster." Now, one more quote that I do want to pull up on the rotation as a whole, as Nurse did say, quote, "Listen, I think there's certainly a good portion of guys that we know are going to be in that top 6, 7 part of the rotation, and then you're going to 8, 9, whatever," Nurse started. "I wish it was harder to do it. I mean, it's hard enough, but I wish it was harder that we had more time. I mean, a lot of it's going to be determined on who's available that's going to force the rotation almost onto it. But there is a bunch of little things. I think we are already experimenting with a bunch of other things that will probably show itself on Friday night as well. Maybe tomorrow I can get in a couple of them now. And I know certain guys are back and ready to go. And so there will be some maneuvering. And this is where the Grimes thing, I think, did bleed into the preseason a little bit here, is he was not on the same page as the rest of the roster from day one. It does feel, and I think the Sixers deserve credit for it, a pretty clear and concise plan for hitting the ground running this year. That these guys were already working out together. Tyrese Maxey hosting this entire squad, getting on the same page. VJ Edgecombe learning off his professional teammates and beginning to settle in. I think that is something that will carry over. And Grimes obviously a bit on the outside looking in. Now, this three-guard lineup, I think, is going to be very interesting. My biggest message and my biggest expectation for this Sixers season as a whole is I just want to see what works and what doesn't. That you need to try out these roster combinations. How does VJ Edgecombe look? Playing next to Jared McCain, playing next to Quentin Grimes. Where does Tyrese Maxey fit into all this? And it's interesting when I bring up each of them in individual cases, because to me, it feels like the, I guess, perception of who they all are as basketball players is a little all over the walls. For Tyrese Maxey directly, and to bring up his stats on the screen, that of course last year in his 37.7 minutes per game, averaging 26.3 points, 6.1 assists per game, did take a little bit of an efficiency dip last year, shooting just 43.7% from the field, 33.7% from beyond the three-point arc there. The people that are the Tyrese Maxey's biggest supporters, and I do stand closer to this side of things here, believe that he is a top 20 NBA player, a certified all-star, and he surely has been in the past. And then there are the anti-Maxey people who talk about how, and pretty fairly, I might add, talk about how he can't quite elevate a roster around him to the way that you need to be that type of, type A star, leader of an organization type thing. Now, I'm not of the mindset that the best player always has to be the leader, or that the leader is necessarily always the best player there. I think Tyrese Maxey is the leader of this Sixers franchise, and that is very clear. I don't think that he team with Tyrese Maxey as the clear-cut best player is probably ever a true NBA championship contender, but that's why that there are other bodies that I do think have the potential to surpass them. And that brings in Jared McCain, as I want to pull up next in this equation here. And to highlight McCain's brief stats from last year's, of course it was ended early due to injury there, but in his 25.7 minutes per game, 15.3 points, 2.4 rebounds, 2.6 assists, shot 38.3% from beyond the three-point arc, 46% overall. He is still just 21 years old, that he's back on the practice floor working hard, and the expectations are fully back on the table. Now, I'm closer to this side of the positivity as well with a guy like Jared McCain that I do believe has all-star potential. I do believe could potentially surpass Tyrese Maxey in terms of how good they are in the hierarchy of the NBA. That is obviously very premature till we're getting there just yet. We've seen this guy play, I think, 23 games in his rookie season, and he's going to have to prove that that level that he performed at was sustainable. Now, I don't believe my eyes lied to me there. I do believe what I saw from Jared McCain, and it is unfortunate that, one of the many horrible storylines that did emerge last year was his season being ended early due to injury there. The more legitimate questions that I think are brought up with Jared McCain is, how does he fit into this entire guard rotation? All these guys that we bring up have their pros and cons, and we're not exactly sure how they're going to fit together. Grimes in particular, that he has yet to play with expectations. VJ Edgecombe, we've yet to see him play an NBA game. Now, I do think it is notable, this portion of things being mentioned from Kyle Neubeck here. What he said specifically was, once again, in parentheses, it also sounds more and more like Maxey and VJ are going to be starting together regardless of the rest of the roster. And this was something that I did tune into his press conference to listen to it from start to finish, and that was certainly my impression of it as well. That there does seem to be, from Nick Nurse's belief, a clear chemistry and compatibility with VJ Edgecombe and Tyrese Maxey as a guard tandem there. That's really intriguing to me because, once again, that is the biggest thing that I want to find out. Now, I'm not just accepting that as fact at this point. I need to try all the different combinations, and I do think, just from a math perspective here, that when you factor in how many talented guards are on this roster, it makes sense to find different ways to put them on the floor together. And I will add, it feels like maybe, 5-ish years ago, that we really talked about the NBA as such a clear, wing-driven league. That you look at the best players, the Jason Tatums, the Kevin Durants, the LeBron Jameses, of guys that, you cannot match their combination of strength, size, physicality, and just pure skill there. It does feel like that's changed a little bit in recent years. Sure, we have the big man, for example, Joel Embiid right here in Philadelphia, Nikola Jokic, Giannis, I think, fits closer to that category. And then guards sort of having a resurgence there. We've seen guys like Jalen Brunson be capable of elevating a team. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, the reigning MVP, the reigning finals MVP, who took a Thunder team to win a championship last year. There's a place for all of these guys if they're talented enough, would be my message there. And it is about finding the players that are compatible with your best players. I think a guard can win an NBA championship as the best player in the same way I think a forward can, in the same way I think a wingman can, and in the same way I think a big man can, if the rest of the roster is complete around them. So while I get the fair critiques for all this guard talent and maybe not the balance that you necessarily expect, I just think, put a pin in it. We'll see what this actually looks like on the floor. Now, one of the bigger questions about actually being on the floor does come in the Sixers' injury. Now, we have two injury storylines I would guess is worth noting here, and the most notable here being, of course, Joel Embiid and Paul George. The latest update that we do have, also coming from Kyle Neubeck of PHLY Sports here, is he tweets out, Joel Embiid practiced today and has continued to increase activity. That includes 5v5. Still needs to check more boxes before he's game available. George is still doing individual on-court workouts, working towards getting integrated into team workouts in the coming days. And I will be upfront here that I think the new ramp up this year, the new terminology of Joel Embiid is ramping up, is checking boxes. That seems to be what is being used by the Sixers organization. I think we should be cognizant of that as the season gets closer. I also kind of get a sense, based on this report here and based on everything else that we've heard coming out of camp, that I do not expect to see these two stars for opening night here. I think what is more likely than not that these Sixers are approaching this with a mindset of, let's get these young guys out and running. Let's begin to at least hit the ground running this year and get on the floor, and then sort of integrate things slowly. That I think at the start of the season, no one's still going to be sure of what expectations are for this Sixers team. There is a world where everything breaks 100% correctly, and we're talking about this team as one of the biggest threats in the Eastern Conference. But we are talking about the Philadelphia 76ers, and things breaking 100% correctly is not exactly the bet that I would make there. There's also a world where this is another disastrous season. Maybe all the demons got out of the system last year in one that went off the rails right from game one there, but possibly not. And that you are scratching, crawling, figuring out how can we get on path or at least bring something away from this season. Anything could happen, and I don't think the Sixers are sure what is going to be the case of that, and I think that is the honest reality. Now, the other injury storyline that I do think is worth noting here, and this is something I think we should be paying a bit closer attention to, has to do with Trendon Watford. And what Kyle Neubeck reports on that is he said Trendon Watford remains out and will not play Friday, which is their preseason matchup with the Orlando Magic there. The team is not rushing him back, but there is no structural damage was shown in imaging done on him, and expecting more on-court work within the next week. Now, Watford is a guy that I think is going to be a far bigger part of this Sixers team than many people have acknowledged to this point. We've talked a lot about the glaring need or glaring vacancy at the power forward position. Watford is the guy that I think would be the favorite in the clubhouse to earn that starting power forward role. Now, granted, we'll see what ultimately the lineup combinations end up being, but this is a guy with a little bit of a unique skill set that can get a rebound, push the pace himself, play make a little bit for others. There is a clear chemistry from his relationship with Tyrese Maxey. I'm optimistic about what Trendon Watford can bring to the Sixers team, and I do think it would be a bummer if he's not available for opening night there. So we are beginning to get into the window of where we have to be cognizant about these timelines, that games are right around the corner, and it feels like just yesterday we were signing off for the season, but nonetheless, the Sixers are going to be back in action soon. But let me know what you guys think of all that. My challenge for you in the comments of this video, I want to hear what your ideal Game 1 starting lineup would be for this Sixers team. We'll take Embiid and Paul George off the table for the sake of this exercise here. You have a complete blank canvas as Nick Nurse to sculpt your starting lineup. Let me hear it. Would it be McCain, Grimes, Edgecombe? Where are you going in your direction? List all those names below. Appreciate you guys for tuning in this video. If you have not already, make sure you're smashing that subscribe button below, that we are ready to get off to the races, that all our boxes are checked right here on Sixers Digest. We're ready to hit the ground running. So want as many of you as possible along for the ride. Best way by doing so is by hitting that subscribe button below. Drop a like on this video. I'll be back. Talk with you next time. Peace.